Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Senate Subcommittee on Gas and Electric Infrastructure Safety under the Standing Committee of the Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee of the California State Senate. I'm Jerry Hill, and I'll be chairing the subcommittee, and I wanted to welcome back Assemblymember Kevin Mullen, who is with us this morning, and Assemblymember, we're fortunate that we will be having Assemblymember Stephen Bradford with us. He's on his way. He was 5 minutes away a minute ago, so we'll see how that plays out. He is the chair of the Assembly Utilities and Commerce Committee. We will all benefit, I believe, from his extensive knowledge of the utility industry and the California Public Utilities Commission. But before we start, please take this opportunity to identify the exits that are in the room. There's one on each side of the front of the room, and there is also an exit on both sides in the rear, in case we need one. The building exit is up the stairs behind me, as you know. The topic of this hearing is the improvement of safety oversight at the California Public Utilities Commission. And what I wanted to do is give, in a few minutes, Assemblymember Mullen and Bradford an opportunity to have some opening comments. But before we do that, I've invited PG&E and the city representatives, if they're willing to discuss it today, to kind of update us on the progress that we've made in the two-way communication that came about before us. So, Ms. Gamblin, please come up to the table, and we'd love to talk with you. Those of you who were at the hearing on October 28th will remember that the suggestion coming from somewhere. Those of you who were at the hearing on October 28th will remember that the suggestion of the expert witness we had, Dr. Warner North, had been for PG&E to, one, listen to the comments made by the cities of San Bruno, San Carlos, and Burlingame, and be willing to innovate in trying out some form of public participation in that, and not say, which seems to have been kind of the mantra in the past, or at least the feeling that was conveyed or portrayed, and the feeling that some of the city leaders had was that PG&E was commenting, you know, we're the experts, we know how to do this, trust us, because any other proposal was not likely to work. Assemblymember Bradford, welcome. Nice to see you. Thank you very much. As I mentioned, we were going to have a little presentation and love to hear some opening comments in a few minutes. So that's really where we were. The PG&E CEO Tony Early spoke last week of an independent review of PG&E's conduct in the Line 147 issue. I wrote him a letter suggesting that this would be a good opportunity to work with the cities on common safety concerns. Ms. Papia Gamblin is here on behalf of PG&E to present what steps PG&E is taking with regards to improving and engaging more in local government so that we're all on the same page. Ms. Gamblin, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Senator Hill, for giving me the opportunity, and members of the committee. We want to have this ongoing dialogue. It's very important to us. My name is Papia Gamblin. I work for PG&E as a corporate affairs director, and I live in San Mateo County. Just a reminder, I shared with the committee last time, my role is to be the primary point of contact for our agencies that we partner with on the peninsula. Myself and my team are the go-tos on behalf of the company to coordinate the dialogue and outreach and communication to ensure that PG&E gas and electric operations, emergency response, community engagement information is shared and discussed. Since the last time we were together on October 28th, we have been working to strengthen our two-way communications and outreach to better work with our cities and inform our cities and create that ongoing dialogue in San Mateo County on gas safety practices. I wanted to underscore that we are engaging in the same robust fashion with other communities in the PG&E service territory. PG&E continues to hear good feedback and positive feedback on our engagement. As you heard on the 28th, at the previous hearing, we had some of our community members, stakeholders share, like Mayor Spitaleri and Mayor Aguirre from Redwood City, that we have engaged them and we're having this dialogue. But we still have, and PG&E recognizes each community is different, and we have. It's very important that we ensure that we have the appropriate level of communications with our cities and counties that have requested more dialogue and more engagement, and we want to honor that. I want to focus the rest of my comments and testimony today on our activities that we've had in San Mateo County since the hearing. Last Thursday, on November 14th, PG&E conducted an informational presentation and participated in a discussion with our elected officials serving on the City and County Association of Governments in San Mateo County. As you know, it is an association comprised of each of the 20 jurisdictions and the county. We also, the very next day on Friday, had an opportunity to conduct the same informational presentation and participated in a dialogue with all of the city managers in San Mateo County at the San Mateo County City Managers Association meeting. In attendance in that meeting was approximately 26 city managers and their public works directors. So it was a nice combination of the county and staff. My team in government relations and myself, we've also scheduled a number of meetings with each of the jurisdictions, and our intent is to coordinate those meetings with gas specialists from the company, including ourselves. So our gas teams can hear directly from our communities what their needs are and concerns are. And at the city manager meeting and at the CCAG meeting, the City Association of Governments meeting, we brought with us Sumit Singh, who's our Senior Director of Integrity Management, and Jim Howe, who is a Chief Regulatory Specialist within our gas organization, so that they can hear directly from our stakeholders feedback and what the community's needs are, so that we can have that dialogue and start that discussion that we want to expand on. At the individual city meetings that we're planning at the beginning of December through the month of January, our goal is to meet with all 21 jurisdictions by the end of January. We hope to complete and address the following issues, and this was directly from the dialogue that we had with the CCAG and city managers. This list includes their input and their direction to PG&E on their needs, so that we can ensure we meet them. We're going to be providing PG&E's gas pipeline, an overview of PG&E's gas pipeline integrity management program, detailed maps that provide information about our pipelines and valve system in each city and county. We're going to be reviewing together detailed information that provides an understanding of how PG&E determines safety and risk assessments for gas pipeline systems. This includes details such as the diameter of pipe, the maximum allowable operating pressure, also known as MAOP, leak survey, and leak repair, just to name a few of the details that the cities have requested that they'd like comprised in this packet, if you will, of maps and detailed information. We're going to share information about PG&E's progress towards compliance of the NTSB's 12 gas safety recommendations, which I'm happy to report that as of last Friday, we've completed 9 of the 12, with 3 currently active in progress. We're going to also share last week's report and the underlying expert technical rationale and recommendations from the California Public Utilities Commission and Safety Enforcement Division, which concurred with PG&E that we can operate safely line 147 at an MAOP of 330 pounds per square inch. We will not be doing that without having communications with our communities, including San Carlos and the surrounding. So I want to be sure that we will not be moving in that direction unless we have communications with our communities in advance which would be coordinated. That would also include communications with the community members that live along Britton Avenue, where Line 147 runs within the city of San Carlos. So no change in operations without having our communications in place first in a partnership with the city and the surrounding communities, including the unincorporated area of San Mateo County and the city of Redwood City. We plan to also outline our gas operations plan to incorporate these recommendations and report back to the Safety and Enforcement Division on our progress. So as we report to our regulator, we want to also report out our progress in implementing the recommendations that were identified in that report to our communities. So that was a commitment that we've made as well. And we want to develop a process of ongoing collaboration. So these initial city meetings, it's just the first of many discussions, I believe, with each of our jurisdictions, so that we ensure we're getting from our jurisdictions the information that they are requesting and needing, but we're also meeting their expectations, which will be an ongoing series of meetings. We also want to meet with each of the jurisdictions about the work that we plan in 2014, community impacts, communications around those with our customers as we do that work. So I think that's going to be an ongoing interweaved component of our communications, which I think we've done a good job before. All of these other things are new, and I think we'll be working with our cities to make sure their needs are met. So we continue to work very hard every day to try to earn our trust of our customers and the communities that we serve, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide you with detailed information about the work we're doing in each of the areas that I talked about. We're also open to suggestions. We want to do better. We're committed to doing better. And I think the 2 meetings that we had last week and the ongoing really helped create that dialogue so that we can take the feedback back to our internal teams and create the work that everyone is expecting of us, like the maps. Moving forward, we want to continue engaging our local jurisdictions. We want to engage our general public and our customers about our gas pipeline projects, and we want to continue to do that in a respectful and appropriate way. We will continue to be robust and thorough in our outreach and dialogue, because again, that is the commitment that my team and myself have made, but also the company has made to our customers and our jurisdictions. So I want to thank you for your time and happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Gamblin. Appreciate that. And I guess just for clarification, you indicated that the dialogue with local governments and with the communities will continue, and in December and January you will cover the rest of the city, each city individually, and kind of work within those cities to create an understanding of what actually is the condition and are the circumstances of the infrastructure for the gas system. And also you indicated out in your entire service area you would be doing this, because that's probably, as we look at it, from a statewide issue, that's equally as important, that you would start a communication on an ongoing basis with all of the communities so that they're comfortable with the issues that are in that or underground in those communities. The other thing that I think came out of from what I heard, the city managers meeting was the commitment to work forward, but also PG&E stated, or Mr. Howe stated, that the idea of having an independent monitor was something that PG&E was supportive of. And I just wanted to get clarification from you on that issue, if that's something and how you see that playing out.
I believe PG&E is open to the independent monitor concept. I actually would prefer to come back to you and follow up with you to ensure that our leadership and everyone is aligned with the support of that entity and the exact position that the company has with an independent monitor. I'm not prepared to answer that definitively today, but I'm committing to following up with you.
So just so I'm clear, you're saying that you want to check the management is not totally on board with that, or that they need to discuss how it would roll out?
I think it's the latter. How it would roll out is where I would prefer having a complete answer for you. I understand that there's an absolute openness for it. What I'm not prepared to provide you detail on is how that would look to PG&E from PG&E's position.
Okay. And I think what, the idea, at least from my perspective, of a independent monitor or someone overseeing what, PG&E is doing in our communities is more reflective of the fact that we haven't been able to gain the confidence of the Public Utilities Commission. And until we feel comfortable that they are doing what they're charged with doing and what their mission statement states that they're responsible for, then there's a discomfort with trusting what PG&E is doing if based on the history that we have. So it's kind of a time change. I mean, I don't think an independent monitor is something necessary forever, but I do think it's necessary for the point in time until we have that confidence level back with our utility as well as with the regulator in place. You mentioned something also about it'll come back to me. I did have a couple, right down the street, I know there's a discussion right now at the PUC over line 147, and it's the second time that PG&E witnesses are there being cross-examined on this issue. And I know the city of San Carlos also hired witnesses who are looking at that issue as well and creating the situation, again, as we talked about at the last hearing, of dueling witnesses, dueling experts who are kind of going at the situation. When Dr. North was at the last hearing, he suggested that those hearings are not the best place to really foster trust and come to consensus decisions on issues. What do you think PG&E could do differently or could have done differently to avert these kind of adversarial proceedings?
When it came to communicating with the city of San Carlos on line 147, we had a series of meetings, and we brought with us experts from our gas organization that were well-versed, but we were not consistent with who we brought. And I think consistency is very important when it comes to two-way dialogue and communications. I think we would ensure that we have, and moving forward, we are committing to ensuring that all of our gas experts that are coming to our city meetings are consistent so that we can have a continuous two-way discussion. The other piece was, by the time we met with the city, we had already entered into the order to show cause process with our regulator. And I think we did not, PG&E, myself, did not do a very good job in ensuring that that process was understood so that it wouldn't necessarily be adversarial, but we honored the process in which PG&E was conducting our communications through that process, and that the city could also participate early on within that process, so that that dialogue could have ensued much sooner than what is now today in a different setting. And I take responsibility for that as the coordinator for the meetings with our jurisdiction. So I think from a lesson learned, we've had a lot of opportunities to learn, and I would say those are probably the two things that we would have ensured, that we had systems in place internally to support our communities as they learn a process that's very new, and for us as well.
Very good, because I do feel that when you look at the adversarial nature of the regulated community and the regulator, that's not the best way, because I look at PG&E and the communities as really partners in trying to provide the safe system, and that's where that relationship should be, I think, valued, and that trust needs to be obtained. The one issue that comes kind of striking, and I'm pleased to hear that the issue of the meetings that you'll have, the discussions that you'll have, the dialogue that you'll have over the next few months with the cities, at least in the immediate area. The one thing that comes to mind is the problem with San Carlos when they, it was a year when they found out, it took a year of time and a lot of things, and I know PG&E was working internally over that issue, but that email that seemed to be the smoking gun of the discussion, and it raised a lot of the concern. As we move forward, how do you see PG&E dealing with those issues, or having someone in place on staff that can identify a problem when an issue let's say not a problem, but an issue similar to that email or that concern that was raised by the engineers, that is immediately communicated to the local jurisdiction so that they don't get it a year later, they don't read about it in the paper or hear that the PUC is coming down on something, and then to create the reaction that we saw, and I believe a justified reaction.
We have some systems in place today for what we call self-reports. So as we conduct work in the field, whether that's routine or what we call baseline work, and we identify an issue, we actually communicate that very quickly to our regulator, but we also have a system in place to quickly engage our communities if we learn of a process or an issue that we discover and we want to share with our community. So we have some of those systems in place, and part of those systems include signed affidavits from PG&E personnel that ensures that communication has happened and that dialogue begins. So we have some of that already identified. I think from an ongoing standpoint, with things like what was going on with the Line 147 type scenarios, we have started the process internally to allow for cross-functional teams to get together more often so that we can have that dialogue and sunshine a lot of the information sooner than later. So that's I think an ongoing process internally. But we do have a number of systems in place today that allows us to be very open about things that we discover, challenges that we discover about our system. And I think part of the discussions we'll have with our cities, which I think is going to be a very good process, is to allow that assessment. Well, how does PG&E get to that place? What is a self-report versus not? What's normal work versus something that would require additional activity? And having that understanding for our cities, I think, is critical. And these meetings that we're going to be having, and that dialogue into the insight of how PG&E gets to that place, I think will go a long way. And that'll also help with the dialogue on what's important to the cities and ensure that we have systems in place internally so that we can get the information to them.
And then you'll have internally, I guess, because I see that many of this work is done by technical people, engineers, and people in the field. So there has to be, at some point, a bridge between and a conduit from that particular department where they're focused on doing the job, getting it done, repairing whatever issue is there, and making sure that information is then transmitted or communicated to someone within the organization that then can communicate it with the cities. So I guess that's another area that you're looking at.
Correct, and actually we brought that individual that helps bridge the operations to the field, if you will, the communications personnel like myself and my team, to the city manager meeting. So that organization existed at PG&E, but I think we recognize that we really want to make that more robust, and so we brought the person that oversees that organization to our city manager meeting, again, to hear firsthand what the needs are so that we can go back and make those improvements so we can continue to deliver to our customers.
Very good, thank you. Assemblymember Bradford, you, I know you missed the hearing, the October 25th, 8th hearing, so you missed that part, but Assemblymember Mullen, do you have a?
Senator, maybe just a quick follow-up on the Dr. North presentation piece, which I found very compelling. What was the most useful thing for you as a communications professional, somebody who's in the field, as you say, trying to bridge that gap with the operations folks, keeping that challenge in mind? What was the most useful piece of information you got from Dr. North's presentation at our first hearing?
In earnest, he really focused on the spirit of two-way communication. We've always had a position where we know, PG&E knows we impact our communities on the work that we do. And when we're coming to our communities to talk about how PG&E is impacting our communities, we're sharing the information on what the projects look like and what impact it'll have on traffic or other kinds of things that may take place. I think what Dr. North allowed us to really hone in on and focus in on is it's a little bit more than just the impacts. It's about what's the mindset, what's the drivers that we have at PG&E to get us to a particular place in order to make decisions that we're making, and that our jurisdictions may not need to have the ability to influence those drivers, but they have a desire to understand them, and that's fair. And I think when Dr. North talked about two-way dialogue and the extent of what that two-way dialogue meant to our communities, I think that's what we walked away with. And in the spirit of that discussion from the October 28th meeting, we then entered into the city manager meeting and the CCAG meeting, the City Association of Governments meeting, with the idea of the dialogue and that two-way. So we didn't have a PowerPoint presentation and an exhaustive presentation, if you will. We gave an overview, but then we really invited the discussion to occur so that we could further that insight to develop. So I think that's the part that we walked away with. And my hope is that the communities, as we continue, see that shift. It's a nuance, but it's a very important one that we recognize, and we hope that that momentum continues.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ms. Gamble. I appreciate the willingness and the efforts that have been made in the last couple of weeks to get together, and I hope that continues. I know that Dr. North indicated that he'd be happy to, and his associates, to work pro bono, to actually work with the communities and PG&E to develop a strategy that could be a model utilized throughout your whole service area, or perhaps with other utilities around the state as well. You did indicate on the issue of the independent monitor that you will be taking that back. What I'd like to do, if possible, is maybe you could reply to the committee by 1st of January, if that would work, on some proposal or some the actions that you want to take with regards to an independent monitor, that then we can all feel comfortable that that we're moving forward in the right direction, and that we can start building that trust that's so important and necessary. So, thank you. Anything further from you? Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Gamlin. Appreciate you being here today and for the update, and we'll look forward to hearing from you by the 1st of the year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, if we could, the next item on the agenda is, really, let me get my notes here, as we move into the main section of our hearing, which is the PUC safety oversight. I'd like to give a little background as to how we got here. Within a year of the explosion in San Bruno, we had a couple of independent reviews of the PUC. The first from an independent review panel, and the second from the National Transportation Safety Board. The PUC adopted a number of recommendations early, and by the beginning of 2012, it appeared that the PUC was on the right track. We were all shocked in the spring of this year when the confidential report of the secret PUC consultant was leaked. What we call the safety culture report showed that the people working at the PUC did not think that leadership at the commission made safety a priority. PUC staff said things such as, quote, "There has been a lot of lip service to safety. I've not seen enough action to back it up." And also comments says, "There is a disincentive for staff to tackle safety." And safety staff don't feel like they are a valued part of the agency. Commissioners don't talk to them. So the PUC's executive director spoke at our Assembly and Senate budget committees this year and denied the problem, or if there was a problem, it lay with staff, not management. As a demonstration that the PUC was moving in the right direction, we at the legislature were presented with a gas safety action plan. I asked our subcommittee staff to evaluate this plan, and the result is the report that we have in front of us today. Two of the weaknesses identified in the report are safety risk management and indecision making, and effective performance management. We are very fortunate to have two experts to discuss these topics today, but before I introduce them, I'd like to give my colleagues now an opportunity to share some of their opening remarks that we have. I'd like to have, to Dr. Arndt and to come forward, please, and Richard Callahan, and I'll introduce you after you get up here. That would be wonderful. And now I'd like to ask Assemblymember Bradford if you'd like to make some opening comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hill. And let me first thank you for inviting me to participate in this hearing. I want to commend you and your staff for the report. I think it raised some good questions as to where we go in respects to safety and PUC's ability to implement that. I can assure you, other than reliability and cost, the number one issue is safety. Safety for the consumer and safety for the worker at the utility. So that's our number one priority. The report clearly demonstrates that the PUC has not made the good faith effort in attacking and dealing with this issue of safety, especially in light of the tragedy in San Bruno in 2010, and with supporting document and reports from NTSB and the PUC's own independent review panel. My committee held a hearing on safety also and reliability in February of 2012 as it relates to the windstorms in Southern California, and we were shocked at the fact that some of Southern California Edison's customers were out as much as 6 days, whereas the local public-owned utility, DWP, they had their customers back in a matter of hours. Southern California Edison then commissioned a report themselves, and it stated that maybe safety and the response should be part of the general rate case, and moving forward and making sure that that's a part of going forth to make sure that safety is part of those general rate case hearings. It is now 2014, and the PUC has just opened up that rulemaking as it relates to adding that to it. So again, it just shows the slowness in moving once you have something put forth in front of you, as drastically again as San Bruno or the windstorms, and we're still dragging our feet. We all know rulemaking takes as much as 3 years, so to add this extra component doesn't mean is it going to slow down or delay this any further. And also, I want to commend Commissioner Florio, because he too stated that the PUC needs to make safety a number one priority and haven't been proactive enough in moving in the right direction. So I commend him for those comments. Recently, the PUC ordered PG&E to commission a safety audit as far as their general rate case application. And I understand why they're asking for that, but I think it shouldn't just be focused on PG&E. I think it should be focused on all regulated entities that the PUC is responsible for, and making sure safety is the number one priority. Again, ratepayers pay for this, they expect it. So I'm looking forward to the dialogue today from not only the experts, but my colleagues as well, as we move forward and addressing this issue of public safety.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bradford. Assemblymember Mullen.
Thank you very much, Senator, for calling this hearing, for your continued leadership on this issue. I want to welcome Assemblyman Bradford. It's great to have you in the Bay Area, sir. As you know, my name is Kevin Mullen. I represent Assembly District 22, which includes the cities of San Bruno, as well as San Carlos and many other communities in the northern and central peninsula. As I mentioned at the October 28th hearing in San Carlos, the issue of gas pipeline safety is of utmost concern to our communities in San Mateo County. At the conclusion of the hearing on October 28th, where we addressed communication challenges, I expressed hope that we had taken a key step in creating a new, open, and transparent and deliberative process of rebuilding trust in PG&E and the CPUC. I know that will take time, and today is another step in that process. Having a regulatory body that is accountable and responsive, especially on safety issues, is crucial in restoring confidence that the public interest is first and foremost. I was encouraged to read that the CPUC has announced an initiative to better integrate safety in its rate case process. That is certainly a positive and welcome step. I also appreciated receiving a copy of the CPUC's Safety and Enforcement Division report on the investigation of PG&E's Line 147 without having to request a copy. I hope that this is not a one-time delivery on information, but rather a renewed focus on transparency and information sharing. Neither PG&E or the CPUC are going away, and my interest is still focused on the future, moving forward in a manner that builds trust with open lines of communication that ensures the safety of our communities. I look forward to hearing this morning how this will be accomplished. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Assemblymember Mullen. And now we'll move into the performance and safety risk management in government. And we're so honored today to have two experts in this field. First, we have Dr. Don Arndt, who is the Senior Technical Advisor for Safety Management at the Federal Aviation Administration Flight Standards Service. Dr. Arndt has a PhD in Industrial Organizational Psychology. We reached out to Dr. Arndt after seeing his presentation at the National Transportation Safety Board's Safety Culture Forum. While there are many experts on safety management from an operator's point of view, Dr. Arndt is the first person that, frankly, that I've encountered who has been able to clearly articulate how a regulator should undertake safety management. Next, we have Professor Richard Callahan, who is the chair of the Department of Public and Nonprofit Administration at the University of San Francisco School of Management. Professor Callahan is the faculty co-chair of the School of Management Strategic Planning Committee and has a broad range of expertise that includes governance issues, organizational theory, and public management. On top of numerous honors and appointments, Professor Callahan serves on the State of California's Performance Management Council, and from that position has seen the ways in which a number of our state agencies have and have not been able to implement effective performance management. Perhaps, Professor Callahan, we should start with you, if that would be all right. So
that'd be great.
Please, and welcome. Thank you so much for sharing some of your expertise and time with us this morning.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Assembly members. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate the work that your lead staff, Tony Marino, has done on this. And so let me take 5 or so minutes to talk about some opportunities or assets, really. I mean, the question as I see it and as I've reviewed the material and as I've worked with state government over the last 15 years, actually dating back now to the start of the Davis administration, was really how to get to better performance outcomes. And the question here is really better performance outcomes from a state agency to protect the public. And so I'd like to and this is a well-researched question, and just to draw on the question as the focus from one longtime researcher at the state and federal levels is really the question is how do you create the conditions that will foster use through incentives, through leadership, through commitment of elected officials on changing organizational routines. And so the question that not just the California Public Utilities Commission faces, but any of the state agencies that I've seen and worked with and had the opportunity to observe on the Performance Management Council is how do you get to more effective organizational routines? And you've raised these questions and discussed it both with public engagement, with safety, and through a range of those. For me, leadership never really has a problem. They just don't have sufficient assets. So the question is really how to bring more assets to bear on this challenge of public safety and on changing organizational routines, and to support the efforts of the PUC staff that is wants to move in this direction. So seeing this as a question of assets, and assets as the key to strategy, I'd like to propose 2 avenues to look at. One is the way in which other state agencies have gotten to increase performance. These are assets that are available to you, expertise that's available to you, and analogous ways to crosswalk new ideas into as you're doing at the federal level with the NTSB and other examples. And then secondly, another set of examples at the federal level through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which likewise faced very stringent deadlines, had to really build in a lot of accountability. In work that I did with the dean of the Evans School at University of Washington for the Office of the Vice President, we looked at a range of cases and worked with federal executives. And so briefly, I want to state the sets of assets and lessons that are out there that I believe can be drawn on from currently in California state government and then federally. The first piece is there is a Performance Management Council that has voluntarily been formed out of the Little Hoover Commission that really looks at the types of issues that you look at and really looks to do what you're trying to do. Develop dialogue that encourages increased performance. So they've invited each month or every 6 weeks different state agencies that have worked through significant challenges in performance And those lessons have been accumulated. They put out a report in the last couple years about this, and this is an ongoing effort. And so rather than seeing the California Public Utilities Commission as a silo, what this Performance Management Council has tried to do is break down the silos between state government, so when there are agencies that do things well, those lessons can be crosswalked into other agencies that are working on challenges. And that's at the core of its mission. It's a voluntary set of actors. 20, 25 meet regularly and talk about these lessons and make themselves available as expertise to bring in particular, to work through other challenges. There's examples of similar challenges, really with life and death consequences. The Department of Toxic Substance Control had to figure a way to track and regulate life-threatening, underground, often, situations. They've been working through it. They had a wonderful director there, Maziar Mashiga, and their staff, Aaron Robertson, who tried to really put performance metrics on really life and death toxic situations. Other experts in state government, Denzel Verardo, had to do asset inventory in parks, tracking across the state various assets and the depletion of those assets. And the last example I'd bring up comes from Homeland Security of really working across the public and private sector, which you have fundamentally in this case. That was successfully done in critical infrastructure protection. Earl Suthers was the deputy director there, and he was able to figure out ways to successfully inventory and protect critical infrastructure. The last set of lessons I'd like to put on the table of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And a set of lessons jump out about from the successful cases. It turned out to be 9 out of the cases that we worked with that there were these types of successes. And just to put on the table a few of the pieces, deadlines increased performance. They recognized there were deadlines and they were accountable for that. The accountability through weekly phone calls to the highest level, the Office of Vice President, really drove outcomes. Streamlining contracting procedures and anticipating bottlenecks in advance was another piece that carried across the cases. Developing networks across the public, private, and nonprofit sector, or vertically across the federal, state levels, but really designing networks, not getting networks by accident. The other piece, and you've discussed this, was not just identifying and mitigating risk, but really putting a process in place to anticipate risk. And they put a number of mechanisms in place. The Recovery Act Transparency Board, which tied into the expertise of inspector generals. They set up IT systems to vet contractors in advance. So it's not just enough to say we're going to identify risk. What the ARA cases show is the importance of anticipating risk. Leveraging existing technologies. HUD accomplished something in those cases through Excel spreadsheets that they hadn't been able to accomplish through large-scale MIS systems. But because of the deadline and because of the way they worked through it, existing off-the-shelf technology became a real asset in tracking assets and moving and advancing performance. And the last piece was the Recovery Act lessons, and this is really it's a lesson not covered well in the media. But it was really federal managers as entrepreneurs and not accepting business as usual, but really taking the initiative to make the changes that were needed to increase performance. So in conclusion, what I'd like to put on the table is a piece of research from the private sector, which is Jim Collins and his research on companies that go from good to great. And what he says about performance is it's really the discussion about the metrics is as important as what the metrics that are finally chosen and those key metrics. And this discussion about performance, what we know from the research of the last 40 years on organizational performance is organizational culture drives organizational performance. We tend to focus in on structure and on other processes, human resources, but ultimately culture drives performance. And what drives organizational culture are the conversations you have about performance and about metrics. And so what I'd like to put on the table, and it's an honor to be here to support your important efforts as state legislators and as leaders in our state in advancing this, is the support that I offer and the research offers for the questions that you're asking of. Really, how do you develop strategy that moves culture forward to really get to the type of performance that the residents and the people of California deserve. So I'm glad to support your efforts. I'm glad to follow up in any way that you'd find helpful.
Thank you very much, Professor. Appreciate that and your offer for the future. That'll be. We'll take you up on it, by the way. So thank you.
University of San Francisco believes strongly in public service, and I'm very glad to support that commitment.
And that's a good plug for USF. I like that. Dr. Arndt, welcome and thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator, Assemblyman. I appreciate the opportunity to address your group here. Few points before I get into a short presentation on safety culture and safety management. Here, we had some conversations before the event. There is how did we get here? Federal Aviation Administration, and why are we here? We don't run any pipelines, and we don't regulate any. We don't regulate any power grids. I have to say, though, that a lot of the things that we learned early on in looking into system safety and safety management, we started out looking at other industries. Some of them we learned from principally Sandia National Laboratories a decade and a half ago. Sandia is basically, if you're not familiar, is basically an atom bomb factory, and we don't build any atom bombs at the FAA either. But we found out that there's a lot of principles of safety management and a lot of principles of system safety that really transcend the type of technical discipline or the type of industry, and they even transcend the divide, or well, I shouldn't call it a divide, but the difference between the regulated entity and the regulator in terms of safety culture and whatnot. And we also started our most recent quest to look at safety management and system safety due to a watershed event of our own, the 1996 ValueJet accident. But actually our agency was created in the 50s over another watershed event, the collision of two airliners over the Grand Canyon in the late 1950s. So we learn a lot from these watershed events, but it's all too often easy to be reactive at those. We address the surface causes, we outlaw the probable cause of the most recent accident, and we go on about business. It's often said that the most vulnerable period for any high consequence organization is after a long period of apparent safety. It's not just complacency that does there. There's a practical drift. Things change, incremental changes. Most catastrophes aren't the result of monumental blunders on the part of one individual or a small group of individuals. Rather, they tend to be built on incremental, almost unnoticeable changes. So we felt that we had to look deeper than just looking at the surface defects, kicking tires, so to speak, doing lots of inspections. Necessary. Certainly we want to remediate obvious problems, but we need to look more at the systems that underlie those. Well, after we worked on that for a little while, came up with a new way of looking at our constituents, looking at our regulated entity, looking at what we call system safety, looking more at the systems that underlie the operations and the risks therein. But it wasn't too long after that we realized, well, the system owner needs to be the one that's principally involved there, along with the regulator. Regulators need to learn to be more than just an overseer, but a leader of their industry. But they have to have certain expectations within the industries that they lead, and that's what led us to talking about safety culture a little bit more. So I'm glad to hear that we've got that in the discussion, because that's really what we want to get to. So I've got a short presentation here. Bear with me if we will for. Helps to have the ON OFF switch on the ON position there. First thing I want to mention here, we probably have heard some things about safety management systems, and you notice there's no safety management thing up there. Safety management needs to be looked at as a code of practice, things that we do, not a program that we have separate. Let's talk a little bit about culture. First off, why do we care about culture? We're in technical engineering enterprises, we're technical experts, we're engineering experts. Why do we even care about culture? Well, the culture is the corporate personality, the way that we can develop expectations for how the corporation is going to perform. It reflects the attitudes of the people in the organization, principally its leadership, but also shapes the attitudes of the workforce and the attitudes of the regulator towards them. It reflects the behaviors. The performance of an organization is certainly underlined by the behaviors, but also fosters the behaviors, how the people perceive their roles there. It shapes the working environment, and it's shaped by the working environment. So you should start seeing a lot of interactivity here. The other thing that you'll hear is you have to have a safety culture, or we're going to implement a safety culture. That can't really be done that way. Safety culture surveys are very, very valuable tools to learn some things, but we can't just put out a survey and say, here's how your safety culture is, make it a program, write a program plan, set some milestones, now we have a safety culture at the end of it. Every organization has a safety culture. Every organization has some way that they see safety within their organization. So it's a little bit deeper than that. Let's look at priorities. You often see the balance scales between production and protection. I like to look at it as a triumvirate. First off, how often do we hear safety is job one? I don't care what industry I'm in. I see those posters up here. It's the most important thing that we're doing. Is safety really what the focus of any productive organization there? We're not in business to be safe. In fact, if you're safer at work than you are at home, you might want to reconsider your neighborhood. We're really in business to provide some useful services to the public, to some set of constituents or customers. That's why organizations exist, whether it's a governmental organization or whether it is a private organization. We also, money is in there, yes, the resources, but you can see there's two-way interactions in there as well. We have to look at safety as being an investment and not just a cost there. Certainly we can't accomplish the mission if we can't do it safely. The work stops if we can't do it safely. But we also have to realize that businesses do have to provide those services. If you find anyone telling you that they should give you money or you should give them money without providing something useful, you're probably talking to your kids. But in this particular case, there we do have to be conservators of the people that are funding that, the people that are making the investments, the people that are paying the bills, the people that are buying the services there. But we also again have to realize that safety is an investment. I've seen organizations in the aviation industry that actually find that there's good return on investment. One of our largest airlines, we asked how many people they hired to implement their safety management system. He said one. Hired one person. It wasn't so much a cost, but it was a reorientation of the way they did the work. The point I really want to make here, though, is that we can't divorce safety from decision making. The people that run the organization, the people that provide the resources, the people that pay the bills have to be the people that consider safety as part of their mission, part of their job. Let's look a little deeper into this. Another diagram here that I unabashedly researched from Professor Henry Mintzberg up at McGill University here. He talks about the business tier. Previously in the FAA, we hadn't really looked at the business tier, CEO, COO, the people that run the organization as a business. We tend to work with the technical people in the middle there, the engineers, the pilots, the mechanics, and whatnot. And then, of course, down at the bottom, we have the slaves, serfs, and indentured servants that do the work down here. Now, let's look over here. Where did Professor Mintzberg put the technical support? This is where the safety department lives. And then, of course, you have your admin support over here. What happens if we outsource safety? We said we have to have safety as part of the decision making. What happens if the safety department runs safety? You can see it's peripheral then to the actual activities of the organization. I just mentioned that the mission and the allocation of funds and the payment of costs and investments have to be part of the decision making that incorporates safety in it. So this is where safety has to work. Safety has to work right down from the top of the organization through the technical managers down into the core. You also notice it's vertical and horizontal. It's vertical in both directions there. The top management has to have a channel to the employees and has to have a channel to the users of the system, the constituents, the customers of the system, so that they're responsive to their needs. The technical supporting element, though, you do need the technical experts, particularly in a large, high-consequence organization. They have an important role to advise, to provide information, to make sure that smart decisions are made there. So they still have a role, but it's not core to safety management. Remember, safety management, again, is something that you do while producing that key product or service, and not just a safety department out there. Okay, let's look at some levels of culture. Another little research here. Artifacts. Oftentimes we mistake the safety culture for those surface level behaviors that we see. They tell us a little bit about the culture, but they don't necessarily reflect the full culture. Also, I see, we have statements of commitment. We have safety policies. We're committed to this, we're committed to that, signed CEO. Just about any organization will do that. Just about any organization will say safety is job one and sign their name to it. Many times they believe it. Many times these are actually aspirations. They want to do that, what they want to believe that. But we don't really have a safety culture until it's so automatic that people can't think of doing things in another way. It's the easiest way. It's the way we do things around here. Maybe that's a cliche, but that really is true. If it's automatic behaviors, it's done without really thinking about it, it's done unconsciously, it's the way we do business, that's where your safety culture works. So let's talk another model here. This one from Stanford. This is from Albert Bandura right here. This is where we tend to think that culture lies, the psychology of the people, and then of course it results in their behaviors. But remember we said the culture can be shaped by the environment. We have to provide the systems, the working environment for the people so that safety is natural. Which one can we really manage as managers, as regulators? Can we tell people how to think, how to feel? Can we tell them really how to behave? We can tell them how to behave as long as we're watching them. This is where we have to work right here. We have to build the environment, and this is where the safety management system is, but the safety management system, again, can't be just a checklist or a collection of practices, that is, a collection of procedures, this sort of thing. We have to build those systems and environment so that that automatic type of behavior in the safety culture will result from there. This is how we'll manage it. And our management behaviors need to reflect the things that people can emulate. Again, the regulator is a leader. So these are things to remember both for the standpoint of the managers of the organizations as well as the regulator to stimulate that safety culture. Let's look now into safety management. Look into the actual strategies here. The International Civil Aviation Organization talks about reactive, proactive, and predictive types of looking at safety there. I like to just call this past, present, and future. Simplifies things for us. Starting at the top, though, I can tell you one place that's normally the weakest worldwide here is when we look at predictive. We're not trying to predict the next accident here. What we're trying to do is look at operations that are about to happen, look at infrastructure changes, look at changes in work practices, look at changes in the operating environment, and try to determine if the way we're doing our work could constitute some hazards there. Hazards don't have a part number on them. They don't have a label on them. The way we do the work, the way we ask our employees to work, are the things that may combine to create safety problems. So we need, particularly in change management and major infrastructure changes or even minor infrastructure changes. Remember that accumulation, that practical drift that we talked about earlier. Now, this should be an expectation for the organization. We should build this into the safety management systems of the productive entity, but the regulator needs to look at that when they're approving, when they're accepting, when they're certifying the products and services of the regulated entity. Now, are we going to be smart enough to use this process imagination to see everything? No. So that says once things are in service, we need to be attentive. We need to be continually attentive into the places where failure are. We know what we designed now. We know what we approved. Look at those first. One of the things, though, that's essential in a healthy safety management system is that feedback from the line right there. Employees, constituents, customers need to have a way to communicate, and they need to be able to do that without the fear that they're going to get reprisal or that they're going to be ignored. Two ways to kill in a reporting system. Either provide reprisal, it's dead right there, or ignore it. It'll die because people realize that it's useless. That's an important gap filler. We audit for what we expect to see. We design something, we audit to see if our expectations are. The employee who's living with it every day, the customer who's using the service, provide value input for the things that we never thought about or never saw there. I'm also personally not a proponent of the old axiom that says, don't bring me a problem if you don't have a solution. Both managers and regulators need to listen to people. We gave them the system. They may have no idea how to fix it, but they certainly are living with the problems. If they have a problem they can't solve, that may be why they brought it to us. So we need to listen to that as well. Finally, we need to learn from the past events. We're not going to be smart enough to see everything up front. We're not going to be vigilant enough to find it in our audits or even in our employee reports. So we need to provide learning when we're looking at past events. Investigations shouldn't be used for recrimination. They should be used for opportunities for learning, to build resilience into the system, to fix problems as quickly as we can, and to learn from those events. So what does the safety management system look like? Our safety management system has 4 components. Policy. Policy is not just static. It includes what we call the accountability framework. People should know in the management down through the line specifically what they're responsible for. Not to blame them. Accountability isn't to blame someone after the fact, but so that they clearly know what's expected of them. And again, this is both in the regulator's organization as well as in the organizations that provide the services. We provide a framework as regulators for what we expect in the organizations, and we need to live this as well. Safety risk management, those three strategies we just saw, from upfront through the current operations through looking in the past, and then safety assurance, making sure those expectations are met. Finally, safety promotion says training, communication, and reinforcement of the aspects of the safety culture. I'm going to stop right here. This in the interest of time. The one thing I call the 3 R's: roles, responsibilities, and relationships. There's nothing wrong with a regulator having a close working relationship with the regulatee. In fact, if you think about it, there's never a case whether it's labor management, government industry, parent-child, or a distant adversarial relationship is effective. However, we still certainly need to respect each other's legitimate roles and responsibilities. The service provider has the responsibility to provide safe service. The regulator has a responsibility to assure that to the public, and we need to respect each other's legitimate roles, but to work in a problem-solving environment. So, with that, I thank you, Senator. Thank you, Assemblyman. I hope that we've been able to make a contribution to your efforts.
No, it's wonderful. Thank you for being here. Now we see the nexus between the FAA and the Public Utilities Commission, or any agency that wants to kind of capitalize on a safety culture, or in the need for a safety culture. I've got a couple questions, then turn to my colleagues. The executive director of the PUC spoke to the legislature in the spring of this year, and he was asked how many PUC employees are responsible for safety, and his response was all of them. It seems, though, that if we say that everyone is responsible for safety, then there's probably no one who is held responsible for safety. So that how can we build accountability into an organization and not run into that problem, or is that a problem? So it's easy to write a safety into someone's job description, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the responsibility is internalized within the organization. Is there some help you can provide with that, or?
There's 2 sets. I mean, I've looked at NTSB, different reports that they've done, and also looking at state government and the Recovery Act, building in organizational routines. So for the Recovery Act, it wasn't just that you were responsible at HUD for spending this money effectively. Your leadership was calling the office of the vice president or his point person, Ed DeSevis, on a weekly basis. And so it's these mechanisms that are built into place. While everyone can be responsible for safety, where is that accountability? Is it in a weekly conference call? Is it on a spreadsheet that tracks the assets? Is it some other types of mechanisms that allow for success to occur? In a nutshell, it's getting at performance outcome by design rather than by accident.
Dr. Ryan?
I think it's also, too, in being specific about what there is. And we mentioned the accountability framework there in the proposed rule that we have for safety management systems. For managers, if you remember the triumvirate of safety, mission, and money, the people that make those decisions need to know if I'm about to make a change in the mission, if I'm about to make a major expenditure, they have specific safety responsibilities. They're the technical expert, and they're the one that's responsible for making the mission or whatever productive enterprise go. They need to have specific responsibilities for them in terms of how to construct that and how to oversee it. And it needs to be communicated clearly how to operate down to the employees who are going to be the users. So I think it's largely in being specific about what those responsibilities are. Everyone is responsible for safety, but what are those specific responsibilities and what procedures are they expected to use?
And there's one more question to you, Dr. Arndt, is we don't have a real definition of safety in law, and I don't think there is one defined in regulations somewhere. So a consultant looking at safety in PG&E's rate case had noted the lack of of a mutually understood definition between PG&E and the CPUC. Do you think that is a problem? And where should the PUC look to find that definition of safety?
It's a question I always bring up in seminars with aviation. We've been regulating aviation now for going on about 90 years, and we've never specifically defined safety. It's not in our regulations. The word safety is all through them, but we've not really defined it. How we're starting to define safety now in some discussions with the international group, because they're typically in the same shape, is that safety is all about risk. Risk talks about how much harm, how likely it is to be harmed there. So we've converged on not a formal definition. It's not a matter of law or regulation there, but a state of being where safety is managed to acceptable levels. So, where risk is managed to acceptable levels, where we've evaluated the degree of harm, we've evaluated the likelihood of that harm, we've looked at the societal benefits of a particular operation, and made a conscious decision that the risk is either acceptable or it's not. It's managed to an acceptable level, and that would be an operational definition, at least, of safety.
Very good, thank you. I'll turn to my colleagues. Assemblyman Bradford.
Thank you. You spoke to culture in an organization. How do you change that culture? Is it from the top down or from the bottom up? Is there any process that you've seen that works better for a large agency such as PUC or a utility?
So, I mean, that's the key question. In the research on organizations, and as my colleagues has described, it's been easy to describe culture. It has been easy to say when you can change it. The best formulation I've seen is a colleague of mine, Dave Logan, and work that he's done. He has a wonderful TED Talk called Tribal Leadership. Really, the conversations you have, both at the top of the organization and at the bottom, drive culture. And in particular, the research on high-risk organizations, where when people make a mistake, someone dies. Aircraft carriers, smoke jumpers, hospitals. The research that Carl Weick has done there is it's also about values. What values you come to share, and those values, the values I discussed, it gets to the senator's question on what's our conversation about safety. And so I truly believe that the oversight function, and you're initiating these conversations from the top down, are of great value, but also the conversations amongst employees and the values that they actually act on. And you can see it in different organizations. I've had students, and I'm exchanging emails with former students who are in the Marine Corps. They clearly have a core value-driven culture there. So the question is, how do you get to that? And it's not easy, but there are ways and mechanisms, starting with the conversations you have, that can move you in those directions.
Mr. Mullen.
Thank you, Senator. First of all, Professor Callahan, great to have a fellow USF Don in the house with us today. Thank you both for being here. My question is around this notion of culture change that my colleagues are speaking to. What is realistic for us in terms of a timeline on culture change? And I'm not talking about announcing an initiative. I'm talking about actually changing a culture and creating a culture of safety. What factors affect that? Size of the organization, the history of the organization. I'm sure there are lots of factors that go into this, but what is realistic for us in terms of an oversight role? And how do you quantify that? How do you know that the CPUC, for example, or PG&E on the private side, now have a culture of safety, and we can be confident when they make a pronouncement that there's a culture change?
So, in drawing on the research on the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, a number of agencies, HUD and any number of agencies within the program, not necessarily agency-wide or department-wide, within the program, when there were a high-level set of expectations, again, coming out of the Office of Vice President for accountability, for transparency, it changed the culture, but not just by saying we're going to be accountable and transparent. We're going to develop Recovery Act Transparency Board using the Inspector General function. We're going to post 2 different websites to track our progress. And so it's coupling expectations with very specific steps. And these organizations, and they talked about, and it was different styles of organizations. Some had dealt with risk more than others. Some were very decentralized. But there was rapid change, and the culture you could tell by the stories they told about themselves, which usually came back down to it's not business as usual. The quantifiable measures were in fraud that was reported and setting up mechanisms for fraud, mechanisms for tracking how much expenditures, how many units of whatever was trying to be produced, and in what time frame. So my observations from the people who participate in the Recovery Act is within these specific programs, culture can be turned around rather rapidly. But it takes significant investment of time and expertise. People who have worked on this, bringing them in, and then it takes support from the top down as well.
And I think that that if we recall the points I made on the levels of culture, these came from a professor, Edgar Schein, in MIT. And one thing that Dr. Schein mentions is that we really shouldn't try to change the culture in the abstract. That is, we need to look at what is the organizational performance changes that need to be made, and what may be the cultural inhibitors or the cultural supporters. So the degree of change we need to make in the performance, the collective behaviors of the organization really is probably more of a determinant of the degree of difficulty it's going to be, the timeline it would be, than even the size of the organization. He also warns against trying to just go in and arbitrarily change the culture or implement a culture, because you may also find that there are cultural values that already exist that are very strong and very useful, and to try to leverage those. And in many cases, the small perceptions that are the inhibitors to performance are really things that, in introspection with the organization, are really inconsistent with other elements of their culture. If I could go into a quick example, I've talked to a number of organizations where we ask, do you believe that most of your colleagues are honest? And usually most of the heads are moving north and south in that. Do you believe that most of your colleagues are willing to work hard for desirable goals? Yes, we think so. Do you think most of your colleagues are competent? Well, these are cultural values. You're starting to see things that are the values of the culture. And then we say, well, after an accident or after a major incident, then why do we think that person who was our valued, hardworking, honest, competent colleague is suddenly that lying, lazy, incompetent person who had an accident? And really what we're looking at is a perception of safety there that's really inconsistent with the majority of our culture. So we need to attack that perception that changes our behavior and not throw away our culture. We need to make things, in some cases, leverage the strong points of our culture. So looking at the performance needs is probably more of an indicator. And then looking at what those performance, remember we said it's automatic, the sorts of automatic behaviors, they're very subtle. And it's not easy to just put it into an easily quantifiable survey or a quantifiable audit. It does take some time, and it does take quite a bit of diligence. Key thing though is the leadership is key, and that leadership needs to build trust that what they need and what they expect is real.
Thank you.
Just one or two final questions. The PUC is about to engage in zero-based budgeting exercises that both the legislature and the Department of Finance have imposed. How should the PUC use this opportunity to develop effective performance management, and how can this process really facilitate performance management, or will it hinder it?
So in the research that I've seen and in the work that I've done on structuring decision-making, the real challenge is to get closest to the people who are closest to the problem. So if the zero-based budgeting is done from the top and it's not connected to the people who are closest and working on the set of problems, people who are engaged with the community, that type of decision-making usually doesn't work out well, whether it's zero-based or not. So really the budgeting is a decision-making process. Successful decision-making processes really go out of their way to structure incentives and processes that connect with the people who are most knowledgeable and are closest to the problem.
Very good. Thank you very much. Dr. Arndt, did you have anything you'd like to add to that? Or?
No, I don't believe so. I think that's
very good. Well, if there are no further questions, thank you very much. Professor Callahan, thank you for being here, and Dr. Arndt, thank you for your participation, and we'll probably have some follow-up questions that we'd love to be able to throw your way, if that's all right.
Thank you, and wish you continued success with your important work here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Doctor. And now we'll move on to the next part of our agenda, and it's nice to see that Commissioner Florio is with us this morning. It is still morning. And Brian Turner, the Deputy Executive Director of the California Public Utilities Commissioner, and certainly Commissioner Florio from the Commission. Thank you for coming this morning. It's nice to see you again, Commissioner Florio. Thank you. And nice to see you too, Mr. Turner. Very good. Thank you and welcome.
Yes.
And I know we have some questions prepared, but if you'd like to make some opening comments, we'd sure appreciate it.
Yes, and I do apologize for not being here earlier. We were hearing testimony this morning from one of the nation's leading experts on hydrostatic testing of natural gas pipelines, so I'm kind of dividing my attention a little bit here today. Thank you for inviting us here to testify. The Public Utilities Commission is in the midst of an ambitious two-pronged approach to enhance public safety and strengthen public trust in the Commission and the industries we regulate. The first set of actions involves immediate and urgent changes to make California safer. The second set involved long-term changes to people, processes, and procedures of the Commission to foster an effective safety culture and full integration of safety at the Commission with the industries we regulate. While we have taken major steps in securing safer utility services and infrastructure in California, there is still very much work that needs to be done. And if you've looked at our decisions on the topic, we've described safety as a journey, not as an endpoint. The challenges in mitigating the utilities' past mismanagement and reworking industry and Commission practices going forward are undeniably daunting. We recognize the pace of change can feel frustratingly slow, and we welcome your constructive engagement in helping with our shared goals. We very much appreciate your recent report noting the often frustrating pace of these changes and initiatives. I found the report to be highly constructive, and frankly, I walked away feeling like, geez, I got a C- on my midterm. I better pick up the pace before the finals. Many of the recommendations in the report are in the process of being developed at the Commission, and I would like to discuss this with you further. First, I would like to express my appreciation for the report's recognition of the high quality and commitment of Commission staff. I strongly believe that we have some of the most talented and capable regulators, judges, enforcement officers, and support staff in the world. It is my intention to continue improving the tools available to them and the management they receive to allow them to do their jobs even more effectively. The report identified several ways in which safety could be further integrated into PUC practice and procedure, including rate-making, rule-making, and discretionary activity. The Commission is busy integrating safety considerations into the general rate case proceedings. The ongoing gas safety rulemaking has ordered financial and management audits of the gas utilities to examine their implementation of authorized revenue requirements and specifically whether authorized safety projects were implemented, and if not, whether new procedural or accounting mechanisms need to be instituted. However, this decision affected just the gas utilities and didn't change the foundational rate case plan. So just this past Thursday, we initiated a rulemaking to revise the rate case plan to set broad, consistent requirements for gas and electric utilities about how safety will be addressed in rate cases through a risk-informed process. The rulemaking follows up on groundwork laid in 2012 and the work by independent consultants advising the Commission on Safety in PG&E's 2014 rate case, which is now with the ALJ for drafting a proposed decision. The Commission is also in an ongoing process to integrate safety into our rulemaking activities. We have directed the administrative law judges and division staff to explicitly include safety considerations in the scoping memos that identify the issues to be considered in a proceeding, so that we can develop the record on a subject and provide a basis for making safety-based decisions. At the other end of the process, we have required a safety analysis to be part of every public agenda item when decisions are made. We recognize that the meat of the process, gathering specific technical considerations for safety and eliciting expert and stakeholder evidence, needs further development. We have prioritized this work for the coming year as part of the Strategic Safety Integration Project that I've asked Mr. Turner to describe for you. The Commission is also looking comprehensively at its use of resources to ensure they reflect safety priorities. The legislature has directed the Commission to undertake zero-based budgeting over the next year in time for the 2015 fiscal year. And we intend to use this exercise as an opportunity to comprehensively review and reform our resource allocation to support the safety mission in everything we do. The zero-based budget exercise will be a critical component of developing and implementing our integrated safety management system. Again, Mr. Turner will provide more detail in these forward-looking initiatives. I also appreciated the several constructive insights and recommendations into current staff and management practice at the Commission. The report notes the need for and the difficulty in developing better metrics of safety for the energy utilities. We're working on an initial set of such metrics for the gas utilities to use in the current gas safety rulemaking. These metrics will require review and refinement, and analogous metrics developed for electric utilities and for the other industries the Commission regulates. As we collect data and gain experience with these metrics, we will continue to revise our regulatory policies and enforcement procedures to lever these metrics. I would note, however, that one has to be quite cautious in developing these kinds of metrics. Unintended consequences can easily result. For example, if we ask a gas utility to report on the number of leaks that are discovered as a measure of how they're doing with their gas system, we could get useful information, or we could end up with fewer leaks being reported because people don't want them to be found wanting. So we've got to be very careful how we do this, and that's one of the reasons it's taking longer than we would like, is you have to be sure that the metric you develop incents the behavior you want and not something that unintentionally cuts in the opposite direction. Within our Safety and Enforcement Division, tremendous work has occurred to strengthen the personnel policies and procedures to improve the oversight and enforcement of our safety-related requirements. Our Gas Citation Authority is becoming an effective tool not only in enforcing safety regulation, but in incentivizing safety culture within the energy utilities. Citations are issued by our risk management section using published risk assessment framework designed not only to punish high-risk behavior and reward behavior that proactively identifies and mitigates risk, regardless of narrow code requirements. I believe the authority for citations on the electricity side granted by SB 291 will also greatly strengthen our investigation and enforcement activities. We've been steadily improving our incident investigation procedures and have seen steadily improving results. We've reduced the time to close out investigations of incidents resulting in death or serious injury in the electric sector from over a year to roughly 4 months. We've also begun to integrate investigation results. We pursue a root cause analysis of every serious incident, and we'll be compiling and analyzing these reports for insights into both enforcement and regulatory needs. Establishing a citation program for the electric industry in accordance with SB 291 will enable our SED to further improve the ability to bring incident investigations to closure, as SED will be able to issue fines rather than having to go through lengthy settlement negotiations with utilities. We'll also be pursuing a thorough review of our investigation priorities and procedures in the Integrated Safety Management Plan that Mr. Turner will discuss. I share the concern expressed in your report about the progress of emergency response plans. Again, this is a work in progress, and when we periodically have our commission meetings outside of San Francisco, we always include the day before the formal meeting a session with key stakeholders in the community that we're visiting. Most recently, that was Redding, California. And a session of that is always devoted to public safety with first responders. And we've learned a great deal from those sessions about how we can better serve those folks who are on the front lines. I've got a longer list of comments here, but I do think you probably want to get to questions. So I think I'll stop at this point and turn it over to Mr. Turner for...
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Florio. Appreciate it. Mr. Turner.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Assembly members. Commissioner Florio has asked me to speak to you about the Strategic Safety Implementation Plan. That is a program of activities the Commission is currently developing. The previous panel was very useful to that program that we're developing. It is very on point. It is a program in active development. We'd welcome the opportunity to work with your offices as well as others as we develop it and improve it and making sure that it's meeting the legislature's needs. I believe, based on my reading of your recent report, that many of the initiatives that we're developing or as part of the program actually meet many of the goals that you've outlined. The program of activities that we're calling the Strategic Safety Integration Program, or SIP, to make it easier, will be approved and overseen by the full Commission and will be directed by the Executive Director with the Executive Safety Council, which consists of the Executive Office, each of the Division Directors, and each Commissioner's Chief of Staff. And we'll be bringing that, like I said, before the Commission for a vote and updating the Commissioners regularly on those projects. The program itself consists of several projects as we're developing them, and I'll describe a few of them. The heart of the project is an integrated safety management system, much like Dr. Arndt described, for both the Commission and the promulgation of standards for integrated safety management within the utilities and industries that we regulate. Dr. Arndt has described the safety management systems generally. Some of the aspects that we're looking to improve upon especially are through the institutionalization of an integrated safety management system, our safety leadership and safety culture, the risk management principles that we've described several times today in industry divisions and the safety and enforcement division at PUC, continued improvement in our auditing and inspections, investigations and enforcement, and emergency response, and the institutionalization of benchmarking and reporting. The ISM will be the primary framework for propagating safety philosophy and management throughout the organization, but it will be augmented by several more specific initiatives coming over the next year to flesh out the more complex safety issues that the Commission management and relationships entail. One of those projects that will augment the integrated safety management is, as Commissioner Florio mentioned, the zero-based budgeting, which we'll be taking over the next year. We intend to use the exercise as an opportunity to review and reform our resources to support the safety mission in everything we do. In concert with zero-based budgeting, we'll undertake strategic planning exercise, focus on those safety processes and outcomes. We'll also employ some professional leadership training that will include the kind of safety climate and culture fostering that is the overarching circle that we see up on the board there. As Commissioner Florio mentioned, we've just opened a rulemaking to revise the rate case plan, which will encompass many of the major policy issues regarding how the Commission considers safety in rate making. We'll also look at how we organize ourselves in regard to rate making, including providing the necessary technical training and resources in risk assessment to staff working on rate cases, and considering how safety and PUC advocacy in rate making can assist the integration of safety considerations. A potentially larger project is to consider how we integrate safety into the quasi-legislative policy rulemaking that the Commission does. As currently envisioned, this project would examine the stages and the actors in the quasi-legislative policy development throughout the Commission, from the assigned commissioners to the administrative law judges to the division staff, and identify where safety considerations should be developed and analyzed. It will also take an industry-specific view and examine the risk categories that we need to be considering, the hazard lists, the failure pathways, the ways the bad stuff can happen, so that our technical staff, the judges, and the commissioners all are properly considering where they should put their attention. The outcome of this project will be specific procedural changes to include safety considerations during the process and the provision of specialized training and technical resources to staff so that they're equipped with the risk assessment tools they need to accomplish this mission. Emergency response and continuity of operations is also one of the specific projects that we're developing as part of the overall SIP project. We're implementing the specific requirements of SB 44 and AB 1650 for emergency response plans with the utilities. That's already underway, but we anticipate a much fuller development of the emergency response requirements over the coming year, and we intend to have a specific project to support that, specifically in some of the community outreach and hearing from first responders about their needs as the rulemaking continues. We'll also be looking specifically at continuity of operations for both the CPUC and the utilities that we regulate, establishing our own plan and requirements for the utilities to help ensure the basic health and safety of Californians in the event of a major disaster or incident. Our involvement in propagating next generation incident command systems, or NICS, amongst the energy utilities is a great example of how we're starting to work on that emergency response. One last thing that I'll mention as part of this program is community engagement, one of the specific projects that we've identified for supporting safety integration. This, quite frankly, is largely a result of the past couple of months and our experience with San Carlos and your own hearing a couple of weeks ago on October 28th. I think I committed to you there that we would look more specifically at how both CPUC can improve our community engagement procedures and how we can require the utilities to do so as well. So we've outlined a specific project over the coming year to develop protocols for the agency and requirements on the utilities. So in closing, I'd just like to reiterate Commissioner Florio's observations that your recent reports have contained very constructive insights and recommendations. While we've addressed many of the immediate safety requirements in recent years, we have much more work to do in tackling the more broad-based challenges. And so we appreciate your assistance in that and look forward to working with you.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Florio and Mr. Turner. Appreciate your comments. Before we start with the questions, I and mine will come largely from the report. I just want to acknowledge some of the positive things that may not be reflected in the report that the Commission has been doing. You have the PUC does have a presentation of the Safety Division at the end of each business meeting, as you've mentioned. It's a positive step, and I hope that the commissioners can think about how to make that part of the business meeting even more valuable to you as commissioners. I don't know if it really has been quite as valuable as an add-on to that. Commissioner Sandoval's proposed decision on the Lifeline program. Well, I don't have an opinion of the program at this point, but she has had an extensive amount of discussion and public safety considerations in that. And despite the many weaknesses in the PUC's safety programs, we see, I really believe, genuine efforts on the part of staff level of trying to consider safety the best they can, and it's all the more praiseworthy because they haven't really at this point received a lot of sufficient training and guidance in that respect, but I think they have the commitment to do it. I found, Commissioner Florio, your discussion of zero-based budgeting at your last commission meeting fascinating. It strikes me that many of the things identified in this subcommittee report are the same issues that the commissioners are grappling with today. The report says that commissioners need to be more involved in safety policy at the commission. Commissioner Sandoval and Farron were adamant that commissioners need to be involved in the budgeting process, as budgeting has certainly, that is the policy dynamic and the policy implications coming from a budget. The report speaks of a lack of organization, particularly in keeping track of orders of decisions. There was discussion, as you know, of how processes need to be improved through IT or otherwise. And you suggested that the inventory of responsibility was not effectively tended to, and so resources would move to what's hot.
Yeah.
As you so eloquently put it, transportation licensing may never be hot to policymakers, but it is certainly hot to the licensee, and I think that's one of the dilemmas that you're faced with. So with that, I'll start with the questions, and if I could, most of my questions will go to you, Commissioner Florio, as we've seen that you've been working for the last 35 years in and around the commission, and we appreciate that service. But before the question, I wanted to comment. You made one in your presentation. You indicated that that looking at the issue of the utilities reporting the number of leaks as a metric for some performance that's used, and then mentioned that the issue that you want to make sure that that's being done and that there's a balance created with that. I couldn't help but think that a lot of that is what got us into the problem of San Bruno, because as you know, it was reported that PG&E actually incentivized the non-reporting of leaks to their employees, and they would be incentivized for not reporting leaks that they detected. So I think here it gets to the carrot and the stick. I think, and hopefully as you look forward, and as safety is of a concern certainly to the committee and to the members of the legislature, that the stick in this case, if that is clearly identified as intentionally misreporting leaks in any metric, that stick should be heavy and hard. And I know that the commission has taken a greater role in making and stronger penalties as it relates in the future. But you stated so that was just a comment, and I think you appreciate that as I do. Yes. You stated in the budget discussions last week that resources move to what's hot. What types of changes would be necessary to make sure that resources and resource movement does not degrade the quality of service the PUC provides in areas that are not hot?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think that's part of what we're going to be trying to get at in the zero-based budgeting process is what is the baseline level of work in each subject area, of which there are many, that has to be attended to. Now, if you have a short-term situation where you need people for a couple of weeks, maybe you can dig into that. But we shouldn't be in a situation where, a particular function, whatever it is allowed to languish for any significant period of time without being attended to. My observation in getting up there like 35 years is the PUC has always been robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I honestly believe that if we do this zero-based budgeting correctly, it will show that there isn't and probably has never been enough staffing to do all the things that the commission is asked to do. If you go through the code and look at all the things that we're supposed to be doing, it's hard to come away from that saying we're covering everything and covering it adequately. So, I'm not a budgeting expert by any means, but I certainly want to see that we start out with this inventory of what are people doing now and what are the requirements that we're supposed to be doing is a really solid framework for the analysis to follow.
Well, and I think that's hopefully that's the direction that we'll see going, because you're absolutely right. And what I've noticed in certainly the review since San Bruno of the PUC and their actions and their priorities, and in the time prior to that, is when you look at, I've kind of come up with the phrase, safety's not sexy. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's nothing sexy about safety, but a lot of the other things that the commission has spent time and energy, whether it's the thought leaders in essential industries, the speaker series that was mentioned in the report, or some of the other work products of the Policy and Planning Division. These are issues, whether you're talking about cybersecurity, energy data system, light-duty vehicle electrification. Those are sexy topics. And
I'm not sure cybersecurity is all that sexy.
It's of interest, and yes. there's an end goal that you can get to. But safety, you only know that you're doing a good job when things are moving smoothly and we don't have situations like San Bruno. And so that's where I think that refocus of attention is important in getting into that. So thank you for your answer. And another one, I gather it'd be challenging to involve commissioners into the zero-based budgeting process, because when commissioners get together, it generally has to be in an open meeting, and you don't necessarily want or can develop a budget in that process. Is this an accurate assessment? And is there anything that the legislature can do to help you so that the commissioners can be better engaged in that process to make sure that all 5 commissioners do have a voice?
That's a very good question. I as much of an advocate of public meetings as I've been my whole career, there are certain things that I think an agency has to do, the housekeeping aspect, that maybe, some kind of clarification of the open meeting statutes could be helpful there, because obviously you want the major decisions discussed and decided in public. You don't want vote trading and things like that going on. But when it comes to running the organization, it's very hard to do that. Maybe approving a budget or a contract or something like that needs to be in public. But I think certainly with the way our legal division interprets the current restrictions, it does make it very difficult for the commissioners to engage in any kind of discussion about, how we put our budget together. It's something that it's taken me, the almost 3 years I've been on the commission to really crystallize a viewpoint that we do have a role to play there that is hindered by the current framework that we operate in.
I can see the challenges with that. And there's just one more question, then I'd like to go to my colleagues and then I may have some more after. In fact, I'm sure I will. But to you, Commissioner Florio and Mr. Turner, in May there was a scheduled safety symposium which included a number of speakers. It was something that, generally speaking, it was a good step. It was criticized, however, because it was paid for by PG&E, and looked to some like a venue for PG&E to lobby on how much it cared about safety, which we know is something that they're concerned with. And in fact, I was listening to a couple of ads on the radio as I was driving in here this morning about how they care about safety. The city of San Bruno even filed for an injunction as they thought it improper for yourself and President Peavy to be in attendance, given your positions as assigned commissioners of the OII. The event was canceled. Is there any effort to bring it back without partnering with PG&E as to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest?
Not currently. I think our focus right now is trying to get the PUC or the PG&E enforcement proceedings to a conclusion. So, I mean, to have a discussion that doesn't involve the regulated utilities, I think is leaving out an important part of the picture. That particular event was always intended to be forward-looking and not to be an opportunity for lobbying on what happened in the past. But I think that it became clear pretty quickly that the public perception was not correct. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, as an agency that isn't set up to do PR, we stumble over ourselves quite a bit, and this is an example of that. But I think that's part of the reason why, and you look at what Public Policy and Planning Division had held sessions on, it's kind of been a shying away from that just because of the experience we had with that particular event. But I would certainly like to see, more sessions like this one today at the commission. I think we can do that. It'll probably be easier to accomplish once we get these big enforcement proceedings behind us.
Right, and I think it's important to have the regulated utilities part of that discussion, but not necessarily having them paying for it.
That was ill-advised, yes.
Mr. Turner, did you have something to add to that?
Just one comment I'll add to the Commissioner's remarks. In the integrated safety management system that we'll be developing over the coming year, the safety management system as Dr. Arndt described, both for the Commission and for the utility standards for the utilities, we expect that workshops and other public forums will be part of that to engage stakeholders and get expert opinion on what those should consist of and how we should integrate safety into the utilities. Many of the topics that forum was meant to address.
We addressed in that.
We expect we'll have those kind of forums.
Good, thank you. Assemblymember Bradford.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Turner, I'm just trying to find out what is the PUC's culture or policy for safety in your organization, and how does that rate, and how do you guys measure that as well in your own organization?
Well, I don't think we have a good method of measurement yet. I think, as the cover of the report indicated, we lost one of our own in the San Bruno incident. So I think safety is very much on the minds of all of our employees. I think the approach that Brian is describing for how to institutionalize that is a critical piece that we've been missing up to now. And as somebody said, when you're in the middle of change, it always looks chaotic. And it does look a little chaotic looking at us right now, but that's because we are in the midst of trying to make these changes in orientation. And I think if you look again in a year or two, the picture will be a lot clearer.
You have a response? Oh.
What I thoroughly agree. What I would add would be that I'm a new guy at the Commission. Coming in, I feel the weight and concern of the entire staff and its dedication to safety. Yeah. I think what we as management have a responsibility to provide is the tools that will help them realize that on a day-to-day basis. And I think the combination of those two, the commitment to safety and the tools to actualize it, are what then make up the culture. We can't impose the culture. We have to provide the tools.
And this whole issue of risk management, risk assessment, really is quite complex. I mean, you get into challenging mathematics and modeling and things that we just have to learn about. It hasn't been part of the culture in the past, and I think the move from the check the box approach to the risk assessment is going to require a lot of training and new resources for staff to learn how to do that. And it's not that they aren't tremendously talented people, but it's a discipline that has made a lot of advancements in recent years, and that I think we have been a little slow to incorporate into our skill set. So, it involves hiring new people. It means training the people we already have, but that will bear fruit and put us much more in a much stronger position going forward.
Okay. And shortly after the San Bruno incident, the quick answer was more resources. We're short of inspectors. We need more money. Put yourselves in my position or my colleague's position and saying, what's the justification that money always solves the problem? If it's a culture that hasn't totally embraced safety, would more money solve that problem?
Well, you can't solve a problem just by throwing money at it, but I don't think that's what we're doing. I mean, we've got those inspectors. They have to go through a pretty rigorous training program that's set up by the federal government, that we have to have them go through that program before they're certified to perform inspections. That's largely been completed now. Those folks will be out in the field. The risk assessment area, we still have just a handful. And, I think that's an area that's going to have to be broadened throughout the whole organization. And, I think we may need more in that area. But I think in terms of the inspections, we will see the backlog come down as those folks have received their training and certification. So one of the things that's a little frustrating to me as someone who hasn't been in government until very recently is how long it takes from when you say, okay, we authorize a budget position to when we can hire to when they get trained. It seems like it's a year between, yes, go ahead, and actually having a body there doing the work. And, to the extent we can hasten that, we certainly will try. But I think part of it is just inherent in the system we operate under.
Hiring is one thing, but I've also saw where you guys are extremely slow in your own investigation. So from 1.5 years to 3 years, how do you speed that up?
Well, that's where I think the citation program is really already being a big help, because prior to that, the only way the commission could take an enforcement action was to issue a formal investigation. So the staff had to do its work, come up with a report that was basically an indictment, and then the commission had to vote on that, and then there would be the whole, typically year or more long litigated proceeding that just drags these things. I mean, the fact that Rancho Cordova was not resolved until after San Bruno happened is clearly the glaring example of that. And by using the citation program, we can move much more quickly. The due process is still there because a utility can always appeal a citation, but we have a much faster procedural track than we had under the old approach, where it was, if you wanted to give any kind of penalty, you had to go through this year or 2 year long process.
And my last question, primary focus is safety as it relates to infrastructure, to the facilities that help deliver power, gas to our customers and to our cities and communities. But when you look at safety as a whole, we also can't ignore workplace safety as well. And I'm reminded of the tragedy 2 years ago at Southern California Edison, the River Grade shooting. And I'm troubled by the fact that you have directors in your own agency who have brought weapons into the building. How do you deal with that?
Well, that was immediately corrected when it came to our attention. And the individual involved had been in the military and public safety his whole career. He had always carried a weapon, and someone just had to say that's not appropriate in this setting, and that was the end of it as far as I understand.
So had the general public done the same thing? Would it just said, hey, that's not acceptable, and that would be the end of it?
Well, you obviously have to follow up and make sure it's followed. But
So the gun was unacceptable, and then the knife, the sword was, I mean, that was a follow-up incident as well. Am I correct?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay. I was aware of a sword that was brought in to cut a cake.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I'm just trying to find out where we are with overall public safety, especially in light of what we just saw 2 weeks ago at LAX and things of that nature.
Yes.
That
Yes.
even as employees of these agencies, it doesn't justify or give you excuse to bring that into the workplace.
Yes.
So it's hard for the public to believe that you're committed to safety when you have employees bringing weapons to the workplace. So.
And just to follow up, and I think you're right, Assemblymember Bradford, that issue, especially when you look at the sanctions that were imposed on one of the staff attorneys who got angry and threw a book at a wall, and he missed the wall and it went through the window, and he received a week's suspension because of that, and had to pay for the window, and was sent to anger management. And yet some employees seem to be exempt from breaking the rules that they've established, whether it's carrying a weapon or, as Assemblymember Bradford mentioned, a sword into a meeting. So it seems to be sending a wrong message, I think, of safety.
And it turned out when we looked into it that there was a Department of General Services policy on weapons, and we're in a DGS building, but we didn't actually have a commission policy, which shortly after that was drafted and circulated to all employees. So,
Are knives included in that policy?
Sitting here right now, I don't remember.
Okay, thank you. Assemblymember Mullen.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you both for your presentations today. Much of our focus today is on macro questions. I'm going to bring us micro, if I can. The topic of our last hearing was Line 147 in San Carlos. And as you know, Line 147 has received a great deal of attention. This is the line that runs through the city of San Carlos, and I believe it was you, Commissioner Florio, who first alerted the public to this possible safety issue, so we thank you for that. My question is related to PG&E's certification of Line 147 as safe in compliance with a commission decision. But the audits that the Safety Division does are only of compliance with gas safety general orders. So my question is, should there be regular audits of the orders in commission decisions, just as there are audits of general orders?
Well, what we need to do there is move what we did in the decision into the general order, and that's underway right now. But I think one of the things noted in the report was a possible gap in our enforcement of our general orders, and we have ordering paragraphs in decisions, and we do have a program developed that we're just waiting for the IT support to formalize it. We even have a catchy name for it, Compliance with Ordering Paragraphs System, or COPS. And we hope to have that implemented as soon as we can get the IT work done, and then audits and the full panoply of ordering paragraphs that we need to determine compliance with. It's amazing how a little thing like a programmer can get in the way of an initiative that you're trying to get underway. But that's what happened in this instance, and I think that's being fixed as we speak.
Staying with line 147 for a second and ensuring safety in the field when it comes to your operations, does the CPUC regularly conduct field visits to ensure the safety of lines, or does it only rely on written documentation submitted by the utilities? For example, I understand that Safety and Enforcement Division, SCD, conducted a field review of line 147 in San Carlos on October 25th, 2013, and noted some issues from that visit. So are those types of field visits routine, or was that prompted by something?
I believe that particular one was prompted. The general process, again, largely because of staffing, is to audit the utilities' records to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But those also almost always include some field visits. And I think with the increased staffing, we are stepping up the number of field visits that we do, but it depends on the purpose of a particular audit and what's involved, whether there's field work. I mean, we could never look over the utility's shoulder in everything they do. It's just not feasible or efficient, but I think checking specific things when they need to be checked and spot checking more routine activity is and needs to continue to be part of our program.
Okay. And just final question, more of a general one. There has been, as you know, criticism of the coziness between the regulator and the regulated, in this case, the CPUC and PG&E. But we also heard a presentation today about the importance of a working relationship between a regulator and those entities being regulated. So how do you get this balance right to ensure that there isn't a coziness, the juxtaposition between the two? How are you clarifying the role of regulator versus the regulated? And within that context, though, how do you maintain a positive working relationship?
Yes. I can just speak from my own experience. I have worked, with, against, around PG&E for almost my entire adult life. I have people who work at PG&E who I consider friends, but it's my job to regulate them. And I think my track record of 35 years shows that when I see something that needs to be fixed, I'm willing to act on it. And I think part of what a commissioner needs to do is model that behavior for the rest of our staff. Yes, we can be cordial, we can maybe even have a drink together now and then, but the roles have to remain clear. Our job is to watch what they're doing, and when they're not doing it right, to call them to account, and when they're doing something good, to give them credit for that. So, it's one of these culture things. It is difficult to know where to draw the line, but I think you can be an effective regulator best when you know the people that you're regulating and what their business is, but that doesn't mean that you in any way put aside your role as judge of their performance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Mullen. I've got just a few more questions, if I could, and then we'll go to public comment. Generally speaking, it's the commissioner's role to develop policy and staff's role to carry out that policy. As we know, with all of the operational issues currently at the PUC, safety, oversight, budgeting, the PUC will probably be one of the most audited state agency if it isn't already the most audited state agency. What do you think, or how do you feel a commissioner's role should be in that? These organizational problems are certainly constrain your ability to affect policy. What mechanisms exist for quality control and accountability for management staff? Or what, if any, more needs to be done in that regard?
Well, again, it's one of these areas where the legal restrictions can be challenging. I mean, if you've noticed our recent meetings, we often have a personnel session at the end that can be done in executive session to talk about performance and expectations. But that, our lawyers insist that that be kept very narrow in order to comply with the Public Records Act or the Open Meeting Act. So it is a challenge. I think you've probably seen us get more and more involved as several of us have been on the commission for a longer period of time. I don't think we have a management structure that is the way the commission has traditionally been managed, but when there are problems, as there have been, I think the commissioners need to get involved in that. And we're trying to do that as well as we can within the constraints of the law.
Thank you. The report that we have today suggests that it is a problem that there has not been a gas and electric safety report written for any year after 2009. Now, had the general been here, I would ask him if he feels that that is a problem or not. And so, since he's not, I'll ask the two of you.
Yeah, well, it certainly is a problem. I think it's indicative of the phenomenon I was talking about earlier, is when there is something really pressing, as there has been for the commission ever since the San Bruno incident in 2010, the work gets focused on the pressing problems, and the more routine things tend to fall off. And ideally, we would be able to continue with the routine work at the same time we deal with the crises, but that apparently hasn't been possible. I have not been able to follow up to find out what's become of those reports, but I'm pretty certain that's going to be the answer, is whoever was responsible for doing the report got pulled off to some higher priority safety project.
If I may,
as Dr. Arndt said, I see a north and south nod over there, so go ahead.
Yeah, if I may validate that, I did look into that a bit, and it was exactly the case after San Bruno that the folks that did that work were pulled on to more pressing matters. And we're looking at how and whether that kind of information is useful going forward. It isn't a report that's required by statute or regulation. It is information that could be useful for analytics, especially in a safety management system kind of framework. So we'll be looking at how to put that forward. But whether those specific reports are the way to do it is an open question, and be happy to engage with you on that.
Thank you. One of the issues that came to light after San Bruno, and certainly in our follow-up discussions related to Aldelay, the plastic pipe that is under a lot of our thousands of miles of it that are under our streets, and that's the plastic pipe that was installed in the 70s. And DuPont, the manufacturer, said there was a problem in the 1980s, 1982 as a matter of fact. 1990s, there were 40 people killed nationwide. And in 1998, and this is the key part of the question, in 1998, the National Transportation Safety Board recommended that that pipe be checked, that it be tested, that it be replaced if necessary. And that recommendation, as what we've seen, most recommendations were ignored by the Public Utilities Commission, as well as by PG&E and I don't know, the other utilities. So while this committee, and I had legislation last year that will now require for gas issues that gas safety recommendations, that those be responded to by the commission. But this subcommittee doesn't have jurisdiction over rail safety, but it's nonetheless in our interest to examine how the PUC has responded to those NTSB recommendations. And on September 5th, 2013, there was a derailment of Angel's Flight in the Bunker Hill district of Los Angeles. And that little railway that goes up a hill for less than a length of a football field. And the NTSB had investigated a fatal collision of Angel's Flight in 2001. They made several recommendations which the PUC pledged to follow. Now, when Angel's Flight reopened in 2010, though, it did so without a requirement that the rail have a guideway alongside in case of the need for an emergency evacuation. NTSB changed the status of its recommendation to closed unacceptable action and urged the PUC to remedy this. In a letter signed by the president of the commission, the PUC responded that it disagreed with NTSB and lobbied to have the recommendation closed with an acceptable action. NTSB would not do this. In its letter to the PUC after the September 5th accident, the NTSB describes a dangerous rescue of the rail car's occupants, dangerous for both the passengers and the firefighter, who had no ropes, railing, or walkway to prevent them from falling to concrete that was 25 feet below. Well, this was the old safety division with the old commissioners. I mention this because it does not appear that the PUC has responded to NTSB recommendations with the sufficient seriousness. And while PG&E has completed 9 of the 13 recommendations, the PUC has completed only 1 of its 5. And all that one required was to inform other pipeline operators in the state of the circumstances of the explosion in San Bruno. Probably more important, on the recommendations that PG&E completed just last week, it had written 5 letters to the NTSB. The PUC, however, has only written to the NTSB twice in the more than 2 years since its report was released. Do you think that this level of correspondence is sufficient? Do you think that if the PUC decides not to implement a recommendation, as was the case with the Angel Flight, that the decision should be done administratively or with a vote of the full commission?
Well, I certainly know we had closed down Angel's Flight for a period of time, and I thought that everything had been rectified, but clearly it hasn't been. I cannot understand why we would be rejecting an NTSB recommendation. That seems to fly in the face of what your legislation asked us to do. So I will certainly attend to that. How often we write a letter? I mean, we should write a letter when we have something to report, and if we're not accomplishing things quickly enough to have regular communication, then we clearly have more work to do there.
Thank you. I think,
Sir,
yes,
if I may, just to be
Turner,
clear,
of course, thank you.
On the Angel's Flight incident, I'm not up to date on the day-to-day, but I understand the railway is still closed down, looking at the most recent incident, and I think that we will be taking a very thorough response to the findings found there. What happened in 2001, I believe, is the very unique circumstances of that railway, which is very historic, very unusual. Nothing else like it in the world, and there was a determination made about the one recommendation and how it could be applied to that railway that we disagreed with the NTSB. Now, we are looking at that again. That is, like I said, that railway is closed, and we're determining how to move forward. And I think there will be a very thorough response.
And I hope so, because the NTSB certainly has the reputation and I think the credibility. When they make a recommendation, it's usually made for a very good reason, after a very thoughtful analysis and research. And so I hope in the future that those be looked at a little more seriously, especially in light of the gas safety as we go back to the Alder Lake pipe and other things that were prior to that. So any further questions from my colleagues or comments on this?
Yeah. I just want to follow up on one other thing. And again, I want to thank Senator Hill for convening this hearing. And just to drill back down on the priority of safety. And again, when you read this report, it shows a glaring lack of focus, if that's the best I can describe, on safety, and more on the more esoteric issues of global warming. So, again, as a legislator, as general public, we really need to see a redirection of focus here as it relates to safety of the infrastructure, the workplace. It's critical. I mean, it's really critical for my comfort level, because you're very opinionated on net metering and all those other things that ratepayers have to pay for, and I think the safety should be at the paramount and at the top of what we're doing here. So that's what.
Yes. And I hope you have seen and will see that in our actions, and if not, I expect to be called to account for it.
What I think I would like to do, I guess as I look at what we've accomplished with the discussion today, but the first step required for recovery is to recognize that there is a problem. And the PUC really hasn't demonstrated over the last few years that they recognize, at least they haven't demonstrated to the legislature, that they have recognized that there is a safety problem that needs to be addressed, and that certainly became evident in the hearings in the spring when the director spoke to the budget committees in Sacramento. I think what we're seeing is a recognition that there is a problem today. I think it's a healthy recognition that we can move forward with. We've discussed some of what I think we all realize needs to be done to move forward. Our committee staff presented a proposal last week of a timeline for some next steps that I'd like you to seriously look at. And the purpose of these steps is to provide the baseline assessments required to pursue effective strategic planning, as described by Professor Callahan a little earlier. First, I would really like to see the PUC develop a work plan in accordance with the PUC section 321.6. That section requires that the PUC, quote, describes in clear detail the scheduled rate-making proceedings and other decisions that may be considered by the Commission during the calendar year. That would be helpful. The PUC annual reports, which are supposed to supply that information and that material, doesn't. It hasn't.
I've already inquired about that. I wanted to see where our work plan was, and they said, look in the annual report. And I think we need to restore that to what it once was.
Very good. Thank you. And secondly, I'd like the PUC to complete the following tasks as they could within the next 6 months. And we'll follow this up with a letter, and that way you won't have to take the one. Compile a list of all PUC programs so that everyone in the organization knows what it's doing, and complete the annual gas and electric safety reports for those years that we talked about, as these really, I think, are needed for the baseline for the utility safety performance as they're established. Also assess operational performance of gas and electric safety branches of the safety division, things like how long do audits and investigations take, and set goals for that, rather than, as we've seen, some of these investigations go on for 3-4 years and with no resolution, and then no action plan can be developed to solve whatever problem caused that accident, and that's important. And also to hold workshops on safety and rate making, as last week's decision indicates will happen. I think that was good to hear. Also develop guidance documents for a risk-informed scoping of safety into the proceedings, as it would be important to see, and develop industry-specific lists of hazards that staff can use in scoping safety into those proceedings. I think that would be important to do. And I noticed that in the safety and rate-making guidelines that were established and you were working on last week, I think we're going to watch to see, and hopefully that those will be carried out, and it may need to be helped by some legislation down the road. If it's not, if you may need some legislative guidance. I don't know, but we may have to look at that. So I'd like to maybe schedule a follow-up hearing sometimes in April or May of next year, where we can see where we are with results of this. On the longer term, say in 1 year, I think that the PUC needs to have a safety performance assessment for the industries it regulates. And there needs to be an employee survey again, on the PUC's and management's progress on safety. So we can see where we are related to that. This type of survey is certainly used by the federal government, as you know, and on an annual basis, or all areas of agency performance, and not just restricted to safety. And finally, I think that the PUC, informed by assessments of its safety programs, should be able to develop a strategic plan for safety by February of 2015. And it's interesting, as I listened to your PUC hearing last week, that I came away with little that's in this report. It states that what we're doing in this report is, I think, what you want to do. I mean, this report shows the weaknesses, and little of it is new, in the sense that, and it's pretty clear, and I think what we heard from you last week is that. What I was concerned with was kind of the dismissive reflection of President Peavy when the comment was made, and it was said, well, there are some out there who feel safety is our only, or should be our only priority. I think I'm paraphrasing here. What concerns me with that is, as I look at your mission statement, the mission statement clearly identifies as the first mission is a safe system. So regardless of all of the other priorities that you outline and develop and determine to be important, safety is the number one that's listed in your mission statement, and I would hope that that would continue to be or will become the priority that I believe the public expects it to be in the future. So I think this timing that we develop here is consistent with your zero-based budgeting exercises, and though my focus is more on the safety performance aspect. So any further things, and I want to open for public comment, and after that we can maybe have some closing comments. Commissioner Florio, thank you very much for your time, for your candor, and for your service on the commission. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for our further conversations in the future. And Mr. Turner, thank you for stepping into a tough job at a tough time. And I think you're doing a great job so far. So thank you. All right. Now we will open this hearing to public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the committee? Yes, Landis. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Senators, Assemblyman, Senator Hill, you made one allusion to employees at PG&E being incentivized to not report gas leaks. Are you referring to the North Bay, Marin County, Sonoma incident of some years ago?
No, what I was referring to was reports that were released, and I don't know the specific location of those, where some employees were incentivized to not report leaks that were detected, or to minimize the situation as it existed so that they wouldn't be repaired. I don't know what type of, they may have been management employees.
I believe there were management employees, because our members can be terminated and fired in the field for actually not reporting a gas leak or falsifying an electrical inspection, and have been terminated, some for falsifying those reports. So I don't believe that. I think you're talking about a North Bay incident where mid-level management failed to turn the reports over and move on up the line. Secondly, regarding the safety issues at the CPUC, my organization has been involved with IBW 1245.
Yeah, can you just state your name?
Oh, I'm Landis Martell with IBW 1245. I'm sorry, I talked to you guys often enough.
Thank you for it's on the record.
And we represent gas and electric workers at PG&E. The safety issues at the CPUC, I really can't speak to their staff, but in terms of their effectiveness in rulemaking, there's been General Order 165, which requires the utilities to effectively inspect their electric systems and record any deficiencies and fix them within a defined amount of time. That's a very, very positive move in terms of electrical reliability. And then the other rule that came up through CPUC rulemaking is the tree trimming order that increased the distance between high voltage lines and trees to 18 inches. Very effective rulemaking. Secondly, and more broadly, there's a number of metrics, SAFE, MAFE, and SADE, that in the rate making reward the utilities for the lowest amount of minutes of outages. And that runs a little counter if your target and emphasis is going to be safety. Because for a lineman, the safest way to work on a line is to de-energize it. So, I mean, there is, I think Dr. Arndt referred to risk and risk management, and I think that's really indicative or important to keep in mind, reliability versus safety. They're not always, they're quite often antithetical. And then lastly, in terms of safety culture, in the last year, PG&E has actually changed their safety program dramatically. We had, unfortunately, a number of fatalities in the electric side over a number of years, and the company response to that was understandable. They assiduously enforced safety rules, disciplined and terminated some employees. And we carried that procedure through the grievance procedure and ultimately got a number of them back. But I don't think that's what changed PG&E's mind regarding their safety program. Their safety program now essentially allows people to make mistakes without any repercussion. What it doesn't allow is for people to essentially knowingly violate safety rules and put themselves, their crew, and others at risk. But it's a big change, and as a union representative, I see it. I don't have to file grievances over minor rear ends and mirror slaps. We pay attention to big, important safety matters now. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Anyone else would care to speak? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, Leonard, Mr. Warren.
Leonard Warren, and I guess for the record, that's W-O-R-E-N. Good afternoon, Senator Hill and Assemblymember Bradford, Assemblymember Mullen. With the exception of the comments we heard from the representative from the FAA, I think most of this hearing is focusing on which trees in the forest are sick. And the problem is that the forest is sick. And I've thought for many, many years that one of the things that needs to be done for the CPUC is you need to have some fairly short-term limits on the commission, probably probably 2 4-year terms as an absolute limit, and discourage even that length. You need some continuity, so you have to have overlapping terms. The other thing is there are restrictions on going back and forth between the PUC and the regulated industry. Those restrictions, in my opinion, are much, much too weak to the point of almost useless. There should be a lifetime prohibition from moving from being a commissioner to working for the regulated industries. And there should be like a 10 or 20 year waiting period to move from a regulated industry to being on the commission. And yes, you have to have a good working relationship. I understand that. I just got reelected to my 5th term on an infrastructure board in a very heavily regulated industry, which is wastewater. And so you have to have a good working relationship, but it can't be cozy. And so there's a tricky balance there that I recognize. But the problem that the CPUC faces is that ultimately, when you have a monopoly, as the utilities are, it's not appropriate for them to be private industry. I used to live in Southern California. Power is provided by LA Department of Water and Power. They had a program. They went around and replaced transformers at a certain age. Do you know how PG&E determines that it's time to replace a transformer? It exploded. That's how PG&E determines it's time to replace a transformer. So you have a fundamental problem here that you know, I recognize the problem, I admire the problem, I don't know what the real good solution for it is, but you have to have a much tighter regulation of monopolies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Next speaker, please. Ms. Jackson.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for convening this hearing. I think that continuing discussion about these important issues is obviously necessary, and we look forward to numbers of these initiatives being implemented. My name is Connie Jackson. I'm the city manager of the city of San Bruno. I have 4 quick comments on the topics that were discussed today. First, the city of San Bruno strongly and continuously has supported the establishment of an independent monitor within the California Public Utilities Commission. We believe strongly that this office and this function will assist to assure that the specifics of safety initiatives, as are being discussed today, are actually recognized in the manner they need to be and that they are realized. We're looking forward to PG&E leadership's confirmation of their commitment that we heard at the San Mateo County City Managers meeting last week of PG&E's support to that important concept. Secondly, and again regarding PG&E and its commitment to meet with local communities, we welcome that commitment and those discussions in a two-way and meaningful dialogue. We also ask and look forward to the commitment that those discussions will actually focus not only on system components configuration and PG&E's integrity management protocols, practices, and activities, but also that they inform us in our continuing interest for partnership with PG&E and its local communities and its service area, that those conversations focus on the actual safety results. What does your integrity management program and its reviews, what has that yielded in the way of important information about the actual safety situation of the system? How does PG&E measure and monitor that safety? And frankly, what is PG&E doing about it going forward? Thirdly, we heard a bit today about the citation process that is newly implemented within the CPUC. Again, the City of San Bruno welcomes that change and believes that that is an important initiative to provide for real-time assessment of our management and response to violations. I would note, however, that the City of San Bruno has been very disappointed that we have not received a response to a Public Records Act request that we made to receive information about the number and the disposition of those citations that have been issued since that program was begun. We look forward to the California Public Utilities Commission meeting its basic responsibilities under the Public Records Act to provide that information to us. And lastly, as a city manager, and I know I speak for our city council, we look forward to better engagement and a better opportunity for us in San Bruno, as well as our colleagues up and down the state and within PG&E's service territory, to the opportunity for better partnership going forward. Those of us who are very close to our local communities actually have something to offer, and we look forward to being able to partner in a positive and proactive manner around some of these very important issues. And again, in that spirit, we appreciate and welcome the California State Legislature's continuing interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Appreciate it. Our next speaker, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the gentleman for his comments and observe to him that the process that he described is often referred to in the building trades as maintenance by failure. Good morning. My name is Stephanie Kramer, and I'm here on behalf of the Utility Project, an organization of electricians, business people, active and retired public officials living throughout the Bay Area, with a special focus on the electrical side of the energy grid. We haven't seen the content of your proposed legislation alluded to here today. I refer to SB 291 that you were discussing about proposed safety changes and regulatory changes. But we believe that a way to improve the accountability and utility performance would be for the CPUC to require that the utilities report any utility-related incidents that involve the participation of public safety agencies, which would include police, fire, EMS, and agencies overseeing public lands and properties. These reports should include at least the following: the cause of the incident, the age of the equipment, the date of the installation of the equipment, and where the equipment was in its maintenance and inspection cycles. We advocate these measures in addition to the creation of an independent expert gas and electric advisory panel, which subject we raised in last month's hearing in San Carlos. As an organization, the utility project continues to demand the implementation of real, effective reforms of present oversight and safety practices, because as law currently stands in California, there are more effective legal protections in place for game animals than there are true safeguards for the lives and safety of utility ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Appreciate the comments. Other members of the public would like to speak? Yes. Please come down, and if you could stand right behind the podium, that would be great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Teresa Dyer, Pacifica, California. Thank you for the most informative meeting today. And in yesterday's paper, I read where I think the problem lies with the president of the PUC itself, Mr. Peavy. And I'm wondering why the Assemblyman Nora Campos from San Jose wrote him a letter in August condemning him for taking $165,000 in gifts and travel from industry-backed nonprofits and special interest groups. Now, isn't that a conflict of interest, and isn't that one reason we can have him removed? Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Next speaker, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Eldon Brown, and I actually learned just a few days ago that the Stephen Westgate, the prosecutor for San Mateo County, as well as the state prosecutor Kamala Harris, have refused to file any criminal charges against PG&E for the September 9, 2010 San Bruno explosion. That was very upsetting to me, as I think that since it happened here within our state, and specifically within that county, that the prosecutor should at least take up the charge in prosecuting any wrongdoing. And quite frankly, I think that PG&E actually engaged in intentional murder, because the explosion happened under the house of CPUC ratepayer advocate Jacqueline Grieg, killing both her and her 13-year-old daughter. So as a concerned citizen myself, it's always bothered me since it happened, but I took it upon myself, which I don't think anyone has done yet, to file murder charges formally in the San Mateo, San Bruno police station against PG&E for intentional homicide. And I was wondering, Senator Hill, as well as you, Assemblyman Bradford, what type of influence are you going to use to make sure that this case is prosecuted as a criminal homicide at the very least? Because even though there may not be any directly linking evidence that I could find that may have given probable cause that PG&E committed this murder, Scott Peterson is in jail for killing his wife, Lacey Peterson, without having any physical evidence whatsoever, just based on circumstantial evidence, and he's on death row. So that would be my comment, and I was hoping that you would use your influence to persuade Stephen Westgate to prosecute this case, as well as Kamala Harris. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Other comments from anyone? Let me just turn this thing off here. Sorry, my phone seems to get a life of its own all of a sudden. Thank you for the comment, Mr. Brown, and just to respond related to the criminal prosecution, it's my understanding that the U.S. Attorney is pursuing those criminal charges today because the statute of limitations from the federal perspective is 5 years, whereas the statute for the state was only and limited to 3 years. And that, and I will agree with you that I was disappointed that we did not see state charges in this case either. But I think there still remains to be seen, and there will be more to be said regarding and more outcomes related to criminal prosecutions as well as shareholder lawsuits against the company. And I think we'll hopefully we'll see more activity in that regard before this this issue is closed, if it is ever closed in the future. So thank you for your comments. Thank you to everyone. Any further comments publicly? Seeing no one. Mr. Bradford, would you like to make a couple of Mr. Mullen? Oh.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Assemblyman. I do need to scoot out for a meeting down the peninsula, but I would just like to reiterate my thanks to Senator Hill for your continued leadership on this issue. Thank you, Assemblyman Bradford, for your policy leadership as chair of our Assembly Utilities and Commerce Committee. To all interested parties taking the time, I do remain hopeful that today is another step in creating a safer natural gas transmission system and a more robust, safety-centered regulatory framework in this state. And I hope that culture change, the creation of a culture of safety, is possible for both PG&E and the CPUC. So thank you for the opportunity, Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Thank you for being here, Assemblymember Mullen. Assemblymember Bradford.
Thank you. Before my closing statements, I would just ask that the PUC look at asking for all the regulated entities to do safety audits as required of PG&E. I think this is just not a PG&E issue. If we're really talking about safety, all the regulated entities should have to adhere to that under their general rate case as well. And I too just want to thank Senator Hill for convening this hearing. And it's important that the PUC address many of the concerns, all the concerns, I should say, that have been raised today. I'm really concerned as it relates to the overall culture of safety with the PUC. The PUC's priorities are to regulate utilities in a manner that provides safe, reliable, and affordable service. That's priority number one. And at a minimum, it's important that the PUC understand it is critical to seek greater progress on safety in all activities undertaken by the PUC, including activities directed by statute and on its own initiative. I hope this hearing today is a turning point and we can begin improving that culture. I would hate to have to convene a hearing a year from today on the same issue. So again, thank you, Senator Hill, for your hearing and those who have participated today.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bradford. Appreciate it. Let me once again thank Dr. Arndt for being here today and for your insight into what a safety culture should be and looks like, and also to Professor Callahan for taking the time out of their schedules to participate in this. And thank you to Commissioner Florio and to Deputy Executive Director Turner. Thank you for your comments and participation. I know we'll be speaking again on this subject, and I appreciate the feedback, the comments, and certainly for your willingness and candor in answering the questions that we had today. So with no further business, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Steve.